Hello, everyone. This is Sanjay Srivastava. Thanks for joining the webinar. And and also with me, I have David Lin, who's the Vice President of Business Development. So the plan right now is that we will, I will start with a Vocarium intro. Oh, sorry, apologize for that. So I'll start with a quick slides with a Vocarium intro. Hopefully it will take no more than 15 minutes. And then David will go ahead and dive in a demo. And then we'll go through we'll take Q&A. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask them. We prefer if you go ahead and use the Q&A functionality of Zoom so that we can have a record of it. Also, after the demo is done, we have a little surprise gift. We'll, for all of your patients, we will draw a name from the attendees from the webinar. And we'll announce that in the Q&A section. So a little bit about Vocarium and this particular webinar. So we have been doing a series of webinars on different topics, and this one we just decided to focus on just giving you a broad overview of all the different capabilities. So instead of focusing on any specific aspect, we'll just give you a sense of all the different labs that we have. But first of all, what do we mean by a lab? So a lab is a fully managed workspace for the learner. When we say fully managed, it means the tools and packages are installed. We worry about provisioning when it is relevant. So we will go ahead and potentially start a Docker container or virtual machine or provision an account for a cloud lab. We put the guardrails when it makes sense. For example, the guardrails could be in terms of how much time the learner gets to use the lab for, or how much dollars does he or she spend. The work area is always persistent. So while you might shut down a specific lab while the user is not there just to manage the cost, but we'll make sure the data is always sort of persistent so the user can start where she left off from. We deliver data. So as you can imagine, this is becoming a bigger and bigger deal that in a lot of these labs, a teacher might want to deliver a data set for the user to work with, and the data set can be anywhere between tens of megabytes to tens of gigabytes, or sometimes even hundreds of gigabytes. So we have architecture in place so that you can do that. And we have roles. So the roles typically at the highest level are admin roles, teacher roles, learner role, and grader role. But then now you can create custom role as your organization need. This is something which we implemented over the summer. And then we worry about identity. So we make sure that we will authenticate the user using different ways, either LTI or SAML or Vocarium's own identity service. So what's unique about Vocarium? So there are, as I'm sure a lot of you know, there are a lot of labs out there, lab providers out there. But what's unique is while there might be lab providers who might, let's say, do a VDI, so give you a virtual desktop interface, or might provide you a coding lab. But we believe that by far we have the broadest category of labs. And to deliver broad category of lab and deliver is with the best user experience and the least cost possible, we do implement different virtualization in our infrastructure. So it could be either virtual machines, or it could be Docker container, could be a managed app. And hopefully you'll get a sense of the breadth in our demo. And these labs are all designed for education. So they all come with a consistent set of assessment suite. So there are a lot of assessment capability in terms of, grading and giving users feedback, either could be live or after the submission is due. There's some gamification available, and auto grading is available. So lots of different capabilities. The users can, for example, work in a team. They can do a peer assessment. They are designed to be tightly integrated with different learning experiences. So our ambition was not to provide the full learning experience platform, but to integrate in the platforms like, say, learning management systems, or say a proprietary learning experience platform. So there's a lot of sort of investment has gone in to make it sure that you can have labs integrated. There's a flexible deployment model. So we do, while we support a large set of managed applications ourselves, but you can also bring your own applications via, let's say, a Docker image or a virtual machine image. And network level isolation for compliance. So if you have, if you're delivering, let's say, a commercial tool, then we can launch your labs in completely isolated proprietary network for you, so that you can maybe launch a license server in the network. So here are some details of what we mean by labs. So we have put them in some category. For example, data science lab, typically it means, and it's a very popular lab for us, that the learners are delivered either a Jupyter notebook, an RStudio notebook, and maybe they are given some set of notebooks and data set to work with. And there are some assessment capabilities which are unique to notebooks. Programming labs, so these go all the way from, say, a CS1, where a really simple lab where the learner can is just given an ID and some scaffolding, and they can enter some code and get a feedback, or they can do a full-blown UI UX, for example, a project. Windows Desktop, so this is our VDI solution, where you can deliver a Windows, either a desktop or an application to the learner. Big Data Lab, here what we mean is specifically that we have fully managed Hadoop clusters, which you can use for your big data classes. Machine Learning Lab, and by machine learning, we specifically mean that we have pre-installed all the AI ML frameworks, and then you can also provide GPUs for machine learning classes. Cybersecurity, as you can imagine, this is becoming a big deal. So we have you can, with a few clicks of a button, you can build a cyber range for a learner with maybe a Kali Linux, maybe Windows 10 machine, maybe, and some applications like not only a part of Kali like WebGoat, and so there are quite a few rich suite of pre-installed images and applications that you can use to construct a cyber range for the learner. AWS Lab, this is a big deal for us, because we have any given point of time more than 1 million learners on Vocarium, but almost half of them, because of a partnership with AWS, are learning AWS, how to do cloud computing. Azure Labs, so similarly, we can deliver Azure credentials and fully managed environment to the learner. Database, this is another popular topic on Vocarium. Robotics, this is, we don't have that many classes on it, but for Columbia, for example, for a few years have been running MOOCs where we manage ROS environment for them. Kubernetes is like it's most from a system administration perspective. So this will be typically a network of 3 machines, one sort of one master and 2 worker nodes. And same thing, just like Docker network. So we can provide this environment with the tools installed where the learners can learn how to deploy Kubernetes cluster. Full stack lab, this is becoming super popular, where especially these are typically delivered through our Docker containers. And Game Engine Labs. So Game Engine Labs, this is, we have the deployment sort of ready, but it's not deployed in a class right now, but we are hoping to soon deploy a game development environment, either based on Unity or Unreal Engine. But sort of we have the infrastructure ready for it. Just want to make sure it's a chat, hopefully. Okay, so, and as I was saying earlier on, that we did design these labs to be deployed in different learning contexts. For example, MOOCs, so that we have quite a few labs deployed in MOOCs. The most recently was an ML AI lab in partnership with Deep Learning and AWS. A skill-based exam. So these are, for example, if you're running Cloudera-based Cloudera's performance exams, then that's delivered through Vocarium. Training boot camps and hackathons. So we are seeing this is as a bigger and bigger use case. The reason why it's become sort of interesting, especially some of them like boot camps, because they're typically a live instructor and the learner is actually not just listening to the instructional material, but also participating in the lab live. Research, so these were designed for to be able to run large, for example, batch jobs. Syndication, so this is where some of our, so we have invested a lot of energy in a distribution model where the course material and labs are packaged by the content providers and they're distributed to universities and our partners. And we have a lot of capabilities and features just to enable that as seamlessly as possible. And then also we can be deployed in virtual campus labs. So these are labs with all the tools installed, which the learner can use at any given time. So this is once again a slide talking a little bit about our infrastructure. We do, from a virtualization perspective, we do manage different levels. For example, programming, Jupyter and RStudio and full stack. These are fully managed applications on our servers. Cloud Labs is where we give credentials of a fully managed account to the learner. You can build a network of Docker containers or a network of virtual machines. And also, as I was mentioning earlier, we have managed batch schedulers if you needed to run a batch job. So we are integrated in lots of learning platforms, for example, with our partners in Coursera, edX, Emeritus, Great Learning, Simplilearn, Udemy, and Udacity. This is once again a core sort of aspect of Vocarium that we had designed to be integrated. We have a large number of universities worldwide using our product. And this is something we just talked a little bit about some of the AWS engagement, because a lot of you, if you're from university, you might already be using our product through a couple of these partnerships like AWS and AWS Educate and AWS Academy, which you might not be familiar with, but we are the lab provider for these platforms, which are running at scale with with lots of universities and learners. Another big thing about Vocarium has been that we do not believe that one IDE can fit all. So we provide a super convenient environment for you to decide whether you want a learner to be using maybe just a desktop or a terminal or IntelliJ or VS Code, Cloud9, Jupyter Notebook, RStudio, MySQL Workbench, Eclipse TIA, and there are sort of a lot of environments where we'll deliver to the learner. Assessment, so we might not have an opportunity in this webinar to go into the detail, but you can always ask questions either in this webinar or through an email where we can sort of talk about our different assessment strategies that we can implement, like auto grading, manual grading, inline comments, peer reviews, some gamification. We can even do multiple choice assessment side by side with our labs. We do support exams, especially last year. That was a big deal. More and more exams are being done on Vocarium. So we had to make sure that we can operate at scale. And there are a lot of features, like, for example, you can say 90 minutes exam for the next 2 days. Anyone can come in and has 90 minutes to finish the exam. Or you want to give accommodation to certain learners to give them more time. And there are a lot of features just to support exams in Vocarium. We are integrated in learning management through LTI. We have both LTI 1.1 and 1.3, more and more 1.3 deployments right now in production. And cloud computing, I think we'll talk about it in the demo more, but this is a really big deal for us. We are where we can, at scale, we manage millions of these cloud accounts where we can deliver an environment, and I'm sure the demo will go into a little bit more detail. As I was saying earlier on, that we can deliver a completely isolated sort of infrastructure in case you need to bring in commercial AMIs or commercial licenses, or maybe deploy an HPC using your own scheduler. REST APIs, so continuing with the theme of integration. So we have a rich set of REST APIs, which you can use it to either integrate into your application, or also, let's say, the part of your maybe a Git flow. which is very popular use of our REST APIs. Thank you. And at this point, what I would like to do is like hand it over to David for the demos. Hey, David, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me start over. I was on mute. So as Sanjay mentioned, I'm David Lin with Vocarium, here to provide a survey of a few of the virtual labs that Vocarium offers. These are essentially hands-on skills training environments, which can start as an empty sandbox or preloaded with some content, and then also protected, of course, by policy and budgets. All of these labs will be demonstrated in context of an LMS integrated through LTI. And in this case, we'll be using Canvas as the vehicle for the student experience on the left-hand side here. On the right-hand side, we've got the instructor view for setting up the labs and watching the student activities. Okay, and so we're going to focus over on the left for now, and then we'll get back over to the teacher experience. We're not going to have time to cover assessments during this demo, so be sure to tune into a future webinar for those topics. So if we take a look at, we've got about 8 labs here, and we'll take a look at the first 3 here, which are essentially data science type labs supporting Jupyter Lab, Jupyter Notebooks, as well as RStudio, all hosted inside the Vocarium cloud infrastructure, meaning that you won't need to work with Campus IT to configure or to launch resources yourself. So right now we are launching a Jupyter Lab environment. And in this environment, this is essentially a clean environment which does not have any user content already preloaded, but we do have a whole set of packages already loaded in here. So we've got about 500 packages already pre-installed inside this environment. So as Sanjay was saying, we can get a full environment pre-configured, and then learners can start right away. So in this case, we didn't load any contents or any instructions in the lab, so the learner can get started by just creating a new notebook and going forth, or they can upload a file. For example, we're going to upload a notebook here. And of course, everything is running on the cloud. You'll see this is inside the browser, and we are essentially iframed here. Okay, and so we can go and step through, import the plotting libraries, and we can start.
David, so there was a request to see if the screen can be bigger and get rid of the V on the top. I don't know whether it's possible or not, but I just want to
get rid of the V on the top.
Yeah, the Vocarium in the panelists or whatever it's showing, right? Oh, you don't see Fufilia. Okay, okay.
Does this help?
I think there's a question from Frederick, so I don't know. Well, yeah, maybe we should just.
I can maybe grow this a little bit. Does that help? Okay, so maybe we'll continue on. Hopefully this is more visible I can also grow this. So essentially, we are iframed in here, but we can also expand this so it will take up the full screen for the learner, right? And just walk through and execute the notebook live, right? So we can go back and take a look at another notebook or another lab, and this is a Jupyter Notebook lab. And so in this case, we are actually preloading a notebook with some data sets. Okay, and so the learner can go ahead and start running code immediately, right? Exploring the data sets, generating some visualizations, and so on. We're going to switch over to RStudio. And again, this is another hosted application in the Vocarium cloud, so no need for IT to build it out. We're actually embedding in a Shiny app here. Okay, and so if we click, oops, let me do a reset of this environment real quick. So we've got a Shiny app. And what happened here? Uh-oh. Not sure why this is not working, but apologies. Let me try one more time. Do a reload here. And here it is. Not sure why it didn't load up before, but we've again got some preloaded content in here, and we can also go and execute this app. We'll expand this a little bit so we can see better. And so we'll execute a viewer. We're running the Shiny app, and we can go and and interact with this app that we just defined inside this inside RStudio. Okay. In the next lab, next couple labs, we also have some general purpose IDs because, as Sanjay mentioned, we want to provide students with real life development environments that they might encounter in a workplace, for example. So in addition to Jupyter and RStudio, we're offering a full Eclipse Theia environment as well as IntelliJ. So inside of Eclipse Theia, and so these do not have preloaded content. And so, the learner can come in and pull in whatever data they need to do the work. But of course, it's got all the software packages that you might need, and if there are any special ones that you require for your classwork, we can get those installed, or you can install them yourself. And so the Theia environment is built as part of a container. So we have a whole set of containers already pre-built. And then if you wanted to, you can build out your own container, which will then get provisioned for your learners. And in this case, we've actually got a container that has a Theia environment, right? But also we can switch over to a full desktop view as well. Okay, and so this is a Linux desktop. So if you're perhaps building out a website in using Theia as the development environment, you could deploy it, and then you can go and visualize it inside the desktop, and to take a look at all the components, to start some services, and so on. Okay, similarly, we have an IntelliJ environment, and again, this is a production level, full-fledged development environment. So you can build and test, deploy code as you need it. And again, this is streaming to your desktop, to the browser, and we're running the IntelliJ IDE. So now I want to switch over to how we can provision and make cloud computing resources available to your user. And so So we're supporting Azure and AWS, and these can actually be mixed with any of those previous development environments. So these are considered resources that can be attached to any lab. In this case, we're just launching these resources directly and making those available. And as Sanjay mentioned, many of you may or may not know it, but you're probably already using Vocarium AWS Labs through our partnership with AWS Educate and AWS Academy programs. With our cloud labs, every user gets their own AWS or Azure Sandbox account with pre-established budgets as well as policy constraints. So there's no need for you to ask your learners to sign up for or to create an Azure account or AWS account on their own. And so there's no risk of them, entering a credit card and forgetting to shut down resources and whatnot. And so we can also pre-launch resources into an account. So for example, if you want all your learners to start with some virtual machines or start with a Cloud9 environment, you can define a CloudFormation template or define other resources to get launched right away. And here, what we're showing here is Azure. We've got some instructions in this case. So in the previous labs, we were not showing any sort of instructions. They were pretty much sandbox environments. Maybe there's some code. Maybe the instructions were delivered as part of the LMS. But we can also deliver instructions side by side for the learners. So we can go and deploy an Azure Kubernetes service following these instructions, for example. Similarly, we have the environment for AWS. And so just like with Azure, an AWS environment can boot up. And we are also providing credentials, not just to the AWS console, but we can also provide credentials through SDKs, through the Bodle 3 or through CLI. Right, and so we've got CLI credentials here that you can cut and paste into a terminal, for example, or you can just work directly inside an AWS console. Okay, and this last lab is a cyber range, and so this is pretty interesting. So this is a configurable sort of cyber range that launches multiple virtual machines that can be pre-warmed and launched as part of a fleet. So one is a Windows Server machine. The other one is an Ubuntu Linux machine, and then this one is a Kali Linux. So right now we're inside the Kali Linux environment. And so you'll see that we have Kali. We've got a bunch of tools that have been pre-configured for ethical hacking, right? And so there's like penetration testers, there's network sniffers, there's exploitation tools that you can do, and very, very useful for learning about cybersecurity and cloud networking in a safe sandbox environment. You'll see on the right, we're also embedding a public YouTube video as part of the instructional materials. When we click the Win Server, you'll actually get access to the Windows Server environment. Okay, and so what we have here, and we can also, so we've got a full Windows environment, so we can actually, target that machine with this Kali Linux VM, for example. You'll notice that the lab came up pretty quickly. Normally, virtual machines will take 5 to 10 minutes to launch, or Cyber Range will take 5 to 10 minutes to launch. But with under the fleet management system that Vocarium has, it should come up in 10 seconds because we're maintaining a pre-warm pool of labs that get provisioned to learners as they arrive. And these fleets can be scheduled to launch at a certain time. So students aren't waiting around, waiting for the labs to be ready. And you'll also notice that all of these are being delivered directly through the browser, right? There's no need to install VMware, RDP, or any other streaming applications. We've got the ability to support a Kali Linux, a Windows Server, as well as Ubuntu environments. Okay, so at this point, I want to switch over to a teacher view of the world and walk through a little bit of the configurations here. Okay, and so I'm going to expand this out. And so as a teacher, these are the 8 different labs that we had made available through Canvas. We also have groupings here, so we can have a bunch of other labs that are under development, not quite published yet, or they're being set aside for now, right? And so, for example, for the Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebook, we have on the right-hand side a configuration to set up the labs, right? And so so here's the LTI link that would be used in a LMS to connect to this specific lab. And inside this lab, we are using what we call a Jupyter Elite lab type. And if we wanted to connect a AWS resource to it, we could click Cloud Labs and connect an AWS resource. We can specify policies. We can attach a policy. Right now, if we wanted to, we can attach a read-only policy, for example. As Sanjay mentioned, we can also manage a Hadoop cluster. And so if we wanted to launch a cluster, we can do so. And then we can provide an interface to learners, right? And we can specify what is available to the learners on their IDE. So for example, right now we're inside this Jupyter Notebook Lab, we set a starting notebook, right? Which is this gender ratio in the US. And we also have a reset button so that, if the learner has messed up their environment, or they just want to restart the whole environment again, they can do so. We can also deliver, as I mentioned, instructions, and so there could be a README button to access those. When we're talking about a environment like the Eclipse environment, we are delivering this through a container. Okay, and so there's a container lab, and we have a whole series of containers that are pre-built, and so you can select any of those, or you can build your own containers. We've got this configure container a button up here to set up your containers. Just like before, you can specify some of the user interface options here. With regards to the cyber range, again, this is not using a container or Jupyter Elite, for example. We're using a VM lab. So where the IntelliJ, for example, Eclipse, they're using containers which get launched on our pool of servers. VM labs are dedicated virtual machines, one or a series of virtual machines being delivered to each user on their own, right? So a user, for example, in that cyber range, we were launching three virtual machines for that user, fully dedicated to that user, not shared, right? And so we can specify a set of labs, and so we've got some pre-configured ones. And again, of course, if you wanted to, you can create your own virtual machine, upload an AMI, make that available to Vocarium, and then we can launch those labs on your behalf. As I mentioned, with virtual machines, they often take some time to launch. And so that's why we provide the ability to set up a fleet. Okay, and so for the virtual machines in the cyber range, we actually have set up a fleet here. And so this November demo, and you'll see that this fleet is the size of one, because it's only me in this demo. But we have, a scheduled start and end for this fleet, and then replenish basically means that as I use it, if there's other users who come in, I'm going to launch another lab, right? So we'll launch another 3 machines after I use this. And so there will always be a lab available for the next user. And when I'm done with it, I can terminate the fleet. Okay. The other thing I wanted to show was that we can see the student activity, right? And we could kind of map the student activity to the assignments or the labs. And so under CyberRange, for example, we can see the launches into the labs, and then we can also go visit a student work area. Okay, and so this will be pretty interesting because I have the CyberRange here on the left, and I'm going to go into this, and then so this is already up, and I'm going to connect to the environment here. Okay, and then also I'm going to go visit that same CyberRange as an instructor and watch what the student's doing. Okay, and so here I'm logging into essentially a mirror of the student's work. And so you'll see here on the left, as a student and as an instructor on the right, I'm watching all the clicks and following along as the student goes and does their work. So if the student needed some assistance, for example, as an instructor, we can go and visit that student's environment. Okay, and so on the right-hand side here, I'm back in this teacher environment, and I'm going to visit their Windows Server as well. Okay, and so the Windows Server is up here. As a student, I'm going to go visit my Windows Server, and it'll be, again, the same environment. And so you'll see that left and right is the same thing, right? And so if I wanted to, I could go and launch some resources or run some apps or whatnot. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of the labs that we have and the instructor experience. If we wanted to, we can also go into more detail on any of these topics.